Hey everybody, it's Lon.TV, and I've got an update on the Super NT Mini that I reviewed the other day. This, of course, is that SNES clone console that I was quite excited about and still am. And one of the things that I pointed out in the review was that you couldn't play games on this unless you put an original SNES cartridge or a flash cartridge into the cartridge slot. But a new piece of firmware has come out this evening that jailbreaks the unit and allows you to load games off of an SD card. So I'm going to load that firmware in here right now and see what it can do. Before we do that, though, I do want to let you know, in the interest of full disclosure, that I paid for the Super NT Mini here with my own funds. All the opinions you're about to hear are my own. Nobody is paying for this review, and no one has reviewed this content before I uploaded it. So let's pop this SD card in and see what happens. Now you can grab the firmware from this GitHub repository, and I've got a link to it down below in the video description. You just go to this page, go to clone or download, and download the zip file. What that's going to give you is a .bin file that you copy to the root directory of your SD card, and then you take this and stick it in the side of the NT Mini and boot it up. You can always go back to the original firmware by going and grabbing that from the Analogue website. So there's very little risk here in bricking your device, and the folks that are providing this are well known in the retro gaming community, so I wouldn't be too afraid of what we're about to do here, hopefully. So let's take the card here. This is the one I actually use in my SNES flash cartridge. I have an SD to SNES cartridge, so we're going to pop that in the side of the console here. And by the way, this is the same procedure that you would follow if you were doing a firmware update that's officially from Analogue. Now it's going to blink here and light up red. That is normal. This takes a second for it to go through its firmware flashing, and when it's done with this, it will then boot up to this new firmware. So let's see what happens after it's done. All right, so we've got the system rebooted. I left the SD card in there, of course, and we're going to go over to a new option that we've got now on the screen here to browse the SD card. And looking at this, this is exactly the same layout as I have on the card when it's in my SD to SNES. So let's take a look at one of these games on here. I'm going to load up Super Mario World, and the reason is that I have a save game that I had saved on my SD to SNES, and apparently this new firmware will detect that save game and let me continue where I left off. Yep, sure enough there, the 6 there is still active, and it looks like I should be able to continue playing this game here, and it seems to be running just fine. Now this game is, of course, one of the launch titles of the Super Nintendo, so it doesn't have any special chips on board that require anything additional to run here. So it looks as though this game is working just fine, so that's great. So what I'm going to do here is hit select and down to go back to the menu. One of the things that they said in the instructions to this is that if you want your save games to save, you've got to go back out to the menu here in order for those saves to get written back to the card. So just be sure you do that instead of just turning the system off. We'll load up one other game here. Let's do the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Turtle in Time. It does seem to load up pretty quickly here, just like it does with the pack-in title. And sure enough, we've got Turtles in Time here. I'm purposely leaving the sound off, by the way, because of all the YouTube copyright issues involving the Big N and Konami. But we'll take a look here and see how the game plays. It looks like it's loading up just as well as the other one did here. So let's go back to the full up screen here and check it out. What's funny is I've been playing some of these games. The Super Nintendo was often dealing with a lot of slowdown when there was a lot of sprites on screen. And this game doesn't have too much of that as an issue, but a few of the games, like, wow, they're running really slow. And as it turns out, they actually ran slow on the original hardware too. So it's funny how you forget stuff or have fonder memories of things than perhaps the reality was. But this game seems to be working fine as well. One thing to note here is I am running this at 60 frames per second, but my video system records at 30 frames per second. So it might look a little slower to you on the recording here, but it looks fine on screen here as I'm playing. So no issues there. And now what I want to try is a game that has an expansion chip on it, namely Star Fox, which has that Super FX chip on the cartridge. It was like a coprocessor. And that might be something that doesn't work on here. It doesn't work on the SD to SNES either. And there you go. We've got a warning here. It says expansions not supported. Now, one thing we tried in the original review was running that homebrew port of Roadblasters, which was kind of a CD-ROM Laserdisc game that was running off of the SD to SNES cartridge on original hardware and the Super NT here. So let's go over to my homebrew folder, and we'll dig into that Roadblasters thing here, and it looks like already we're going to have some trouble here, but let's load up the game and see what happens. Yep, a fatal error. We don't have the MSU1 hardware. This was something that the onboard FPGA on that SD2 SNES was actually able to do, so you can't do it here. So it looks like at the moment, this first jailbreak, and I expect there probably will be more, will at least add the functionality of being able to play games off of the SD card without having to have a flash cartridge installed. So if you were thinking about getting an SD to SNES, you may not need one at this point because you can replicate most of that hardware just through the firmware here, although that MSU thing that we demoed in the original review does require that SD2 SNES to work. And it's actually kind of a fun thing, so it might still be a good reason to pick up one of those flash cartridges. And of course, it works on the original hardware too. At the moment, there are no additional cores, but one of the things we saw with the NT Mini last year was that over the course of a couple of weeks, we got a core for the Atari 2600 and the ColecoVision and the Sega Master System. So I am hopeful that we probably will see this firmware added onto over the next couple of weeks with new functionality for the console here. So I'm going to keep on this for all of you. I'll be checking that link every couple of days, but it looks like there already now is some additional functionality that's made its way to this console, and it's through a reputable source, so I'm okay running it on here. And because this is not an internet-connected device, I think we're okay taking a little risk here with this firmware. I think we're going to be okay on this. So that is the first of probably many jailbreak firmwares that we'll be seeing here on the Super NT. And until next time, this is Lon.TV. Thanks for watching.
This channel is brought to you by the Lon.TV supporters, including gold-level supporters of the Black Eyed and Blues Music Hour podcast: Chris Allegretta, Gerard Newberg, and Kalyan Kumar. If you want to help the channel, you can by contributing as little as $1 a month. Head over to lon.tv/support to learn more. And don't forget to subscribe. Visit lon.tv/s.